Welcome to On the Vineyard, a 10-minute weekly wrap-up of news from the Vineyard Gazette Media Group on Martha's Vineyard. I'm publisher Monica Brady-Meyerov. We're so glad you're here. On the Vineyard is sponsored by Martha's Vineyard Bank. Monday, the island celebrated Martin Luther King Day with a luncheon at the PA Club that was at capacity. The Gazette's Oak Bluffs town columnist Richard Taylor remembers the many disciples and admirers of the Reverend King who have preached on the island. Taylor writes, "The island remains a refuge for those still working to advance our freedoms." And coming up, we take a look at the housing market in 2025.
The market at this point has appreciated to its highest place ever, and that growth is expected to continue into next year.
More on that story in a moment. This week has been super cold. The flu is running rampant on the island, and I feel for many on the Gazette staff and some friends who've had the flu or bronchitis or just a bad cold. That's why I thought it would be interesting to attend the Vineyard Preservation Trust's Community in Conversation series at the Carnegie last Wednesday with Dr. Jerry Yukovich. He's a physician with Martha's Vineyard
Sarah,
Medical.
Is COVID still happening?
Good question, COVID.
Yes. I don't know what the totals are, but it's still around. I've seen several cases in the past 3 weeks, and people are still suffering from long COVID, and sometimes even you can have psychiatric. I was called over to a person's house, and her husband was recovering from COVID. This was about a year and a half ago, and this guy was on his way to Paris. He decided he wanted to fly over and see all his friends. He was having a manic attack. He'd never had one before. She'd never seen him behave this way.
Next Wednesday, the conversation at the Carnegie is about an alternative high school program. That's the sound of the historic press in the Vineyard Gazette offices in Edgartown printing the paper. That means it's time to go upstairs to the newsroom and check in with Ethan Genter, the managing editor, and the reporters on this week's news.
Now we're going to be turning over to Emma Kilbride, who did a story about the real estate market. Emma, what are we seeing in real estate here on the island?
According to realtors on the island and other experts on the market, 2025 was the first year that we've seen since COVID where we've seen really stable upward growth. And that is expected to continue into 2026. And
what did we see during COVID? There was a lot of ups and downs, right?
Exactly. So right after COVID, there was a so-called housing bubble here on the island because the island suddenly became a very attractive place to live. People saw it as a place to seek refuge from COVID. So people came in droves and they bought houses. And in the years that followed that, there were dips and rebounds, but now things are rebounding in a much more stable and real estate experts are saying sustainable way.
We reached these historic peaks during COVID, and we're still seeing that continue to climb up here. The median sale price was $1.7 million, which is a record for us, yeah?
Exactly, yes. The market at this point has appreciated to its highest place ever. And like I said, that growth is expected to continue into next year.
And for the average year-round islander, what does this mean for them?
Because the market on the Vineyard is dominated by second home buyers who maybe have a little bit more flexibility with how much they can spend on a home, it is becoming increasingly difficult for the typical year-round islander or first-time home buyer to break into this market because things are so expensive.
And what sort of homes are we seeing on the market right now?
There are very few things that go on the market for fewer than $1 million. There are the occasional mid-700 to high 900 range homes that go on the market, but generally speaking, $1 million is the lowest that you'll regularly see a home listed for.
And we have seen some historic highs this year, too, on home sale prices, right?
Yeah, there were 2 historic highs, the second beating out the first one's record. The first one was Blue Heron Farm in Kilmark, which sold for $37 million over the summer. And then after that, there was a property in Katama Bay that went for $37.5 million.
So for us average Joes out there, it doesn't seem like it'll change at any point soon, but we'll keep you posted. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Ethan.
We now turn to Louisa Hofstadter, who traveled over to Falmouth this week to cover the first Steamship Authority Board meeting for Alex Kriska, the new GM. Louisa, what happened at the meeting?
Well, this was Alex's second week on the job, I think, and his first meeting with the Board of Governors. And, of course, Alex got one heck of a door prize when he started his job in the form of the Inspector General's report, which basically shredded the Steamship Authority for mismanaging money and projects under the previous general manager. So Alex Kriska read out his draft response to the State Inspector General, saying that, in fact, the report called out a number of things that had also been mentioned in 2018. Some of these problems have been persisting. Patchy governance, inconsistent oversight, unclear communication between the board, the staff, management. General manager wasn't always keeping the board informed of what he was doing with money. There were weaknesses in financial controls and no strategic plan. So he laid out kind of a roadmap. He even said, this is a roadmap, and I'm going to work with the board and the staff to address these things.
Yeah, he vowed to kind of take some of these deep-rooted issues on. We also got some news this week about potential changes to the reservation system. What were some of the things that the steamship's eyeing as they are bringing on this new system?
There's a lot. There are some things that people will find a bit jarring about the proposed policy changes. Certain things such as we will no longer be able, for instance, with our car reservations, to cancel one in advance of traveling and just keep it as an open return. Instead, we'd be required to cancel for a refund and then rebook. There will also be cancellation fees depending on when you cancel. There will no longer be paper tickets if this goes forward as planned, because they haven't been able to figure out a way to make that work with the new system. They will be defining anything wider than 4 feet, including motorcycle-type vehicles, as motor vehicles rather than cycles. They will be assigning deck space based on the actual linear feet of a vehicle rather than on this sort of block reservation system they have now, where they have, ranges of sizes known as spaces.
And the idea is to really cut down on this. We hear it all the time. People going to a boat and that where they were told was full and seeing open spaces on it. A lot of this is aimed at trying to cut that down, right?
Absolutely. That's almost job one, is how do we get to know empty boats, as the Gibbous consultant said. And one of the problems that has been causing this to occur over and over again is that people will, in fact, make reservations and then not honor them, often because they have signed up for so many wait lists that they were able to grab another trip, but it was so close to this sailing time that the steamship was not able to rebook that space. And so we will also be limited in the number of waiting lists we can join.
Lots of changes coming. Thanks so much, Louisa.
You're welcome, Ethan.
You can read more on these stories and all the news for free at vineyardgazette.com. Mocha Mott served its last coffee on Sunday, and the line was out the door as many people came to say goodbye to the loyal staff. But good news, Tokopuro is taking over the building and the business. They have coffee shops in Edgartown and Oak Bluffs. You can still get your Mocha Mott's fix in the summer at the Oak Bluffs location. When the weather is cold, it's fun to hunker down and cook. If you want to learn how to bake bread, the Farm Institute is holding a hands-on focaccia class on Saturday. Terry Culetto will show you how to make your own focaccia and put an edible design on the top of the bread. And there's a big snowstorm coming this weekend. I thought woodblock artist Ruth Kirschmeyer of West Tisbury had some good advice for us all.
I grieve the absence of light in the winter, but I do spend a lot of time in my studio. I think, we're almost like animals that hibernate. I tend to go to bed earlier, and I read until my eyes won't do it anymore. I make a wonderful bed, I think, oh, how delicious this bed is. And then I wake with the light and I look out at my garden. I can sleep as long as I like. I don't have to consider another personality living in the house, just me. And I I'm savoring this time when I can do whatever I want, whenever I want.
Thank you to the Martha's Vineyard Museum and Andaya Whitcomb and Lindsay Lee, who conducted this interview with Ruth in 2023. Our theme music is from island composer and musician Michael Hayden. If you like the show, please follow us so you won't miss an episode, and tell a friend who loves the Vineyard. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at On the Vineyard Podcast. Thanks to our sponsor, Martha's Vineyard Bank, a community bank whose employees live and work locally, providing personalized guidance and committed to understanding the needs of the community. Learn more at mvbank.com. I'm Monica Brady-Myrov. Thanks for joining us on The Vineyard. Talk to you next week.